Hi guys, welcome to Abuse Recovery Success. I'm excited to do another episode with you guys, but today's guest I think is quite special because she's a survivor of domestic violence. As we all know, there's so much of it out there and so many people aren't talking about it. People are scared and they feel a lot of shame around it. And the purpose of our podcast, Abuse Recovery Success, is to truly shine light on these dark corners and allow survivors and thrivers like Veronica to speak out and shed light for others. Veronica, welcome to Abuse Recovery Success. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here, and I can't wait to, shed light on stories that are very similar to mine and yours, and to have everyone else who's going through this or who have been through this to feel heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Veronica, I haven't given the audience much to go on. I want you to share your story and just kind of tell the listener what happened and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so it's a lot, and I'll try to do my best to condense it. But about 5 years ago, I was in an abusive domestic relationship, which lasted for about a year, but the relationship was about 2 years. So for me, it was quite interesting to have a year of a relationship and have like a switch all of a sudden after that year to something really abusive and harmful physically, mentally, and emotionally. And what was also interesting enough on my end was when that abuse started, I was doing this long distance internship program, and it was one of the best internship programs that I was in. And it was like going from one of the best parts that has in my life that has ever happened to me, and then shifting gears into going to the worst part of my life that's ever happened to me. So essentially, when I got into the relationship, we clicked really well, and there was a lot of chemistry, and we had the same values, and we just clicked a lot on a lot of things. But there were just signs that I could tell in his personality where he felt like he needed to be the one with the most attention, from other people. And he also felt a little bit like he needed to control a lot of aspects in his life, because I think family background wise, he didn't have a lot of control over things. So in the things that I feel like within the relationship that we had, he needed to gain a bit more control. And it was just little subtle things here and there in the beginning that I felt like were easy to overcome and get over. But then once I left and did that internship and that long distance, I think that's when he lacked that sense of control. I wasn't there. I wasn't in close contact with him. I wasn't there where he could visually see me and visually talk to me. So I think that's when it kind of shifted for him. So it started out with really angry phone calls because he wasn't in proximity to me. And for a little bit, I decided, I can't do this anymore. And I kind of broke it off. But when I came back, we talked it out, and we got back together again. But that's when I think all the physical stuff happened. So it was just car rides with arguments. And that was the first time he hit me, when we were on a ride going back from a restaurant. And at first, I wasn't sure what happened. I was confused about why he landed the first blow. And I thought, and it's interesting how we as victims were like, oh, this is my fault. This is why he did that. We were the ones who made him angry, and that's why he hit us. And I thought to myself, maybe, and this was also just to give you a little bit more context, in my internship, I lost weight. I was the most confident I've ever felt in that time. And things were going really well for me. I had an opportunity with that internship. And then after that, I landed a really good job after too. And he was still kind of just staying the same. And I think in that way, it was almost again, just to reiterate, he lost that control of trying to, have things that he wanted to play out in his life. And so I think he kind of spiraled from there when he saw that I was drifting towards something else that wasn't in his vision or his plan or his mind. And so that also triggered me to feel insecure. And on top of that, um, while I was at the internship, I think his way of coping with the loss of control of not having me around was him gaining control and then cheating on me behind my back. So he was cheating on me. And when I got back, and I didn't know any of this. And little fast forward, at the end of the relationship, when I finally got out, I realized that he had cheated on me with his ex, with a coworker, with a boss, and it was just multiple people. And it was sort of almost unfathomable, the fact that like I went through all that abuse for a year and he was also cheating on me behind my back with all these people. And I had no clue. And the abuse ranges from like me wanting to leave his room when I felt uncomfortable, but him dragging me and making me stay in his room, locking the door, and just me trying to like fight and escape, but he was holding me back. And also to the point where just emotional and verbal abuse as well, when I would feel confident in my body and wear clothes that I felt more confident in, he would degrade me and say like, oh, why are you trying to look like a whore? Why are you trying to look like a slut? And also to the point where he was trying to like rip the clothes off too. And let me know if this is being too graphic.
No,
but
go ahead. We talk about it all here.
Yeah. So it was like emotional, physical, and mental. And it was also to the point where things kind of turned up a notch and he was breaking my things. Like every time I tried to leave his room, because he's all about control, he would grab something of mine, break it. And a lot of the times it was my phone. So I think I had to have my phone replaced at least like 3 times in that year. And it's not cheap to replace a phone. So, and I couldn't really explain how or why, like I always had to keep changing my phone. And it was something that, and again, going back to that shame, like I couldn't talk to my friends about why I was changing my phone so much, or, and they thought I was just blowing away my money doing all this like stupid stuff. And I just kept chalking it down to excuses like, oh, I'm just clumsy, like, oh, I'm partying too much, just broke my phone again. So it's just kind of sad how like we all come up with these excuses to sort of justify what was happening. And I think what made me decide to really like end the whole relationship, and it was something that I needed. It was more of a wake up call. I never I didn't feel like I was emotionally strong enough to walk away myself, because one, like he would stop me. He would have that control and manipulate me into coming back, or physically stopping me from walking out the door. But what made me decide to leave was when he broke my phone for the last time, and I was walking home at like 3 or 4 a.m. in winter, and I was just crying my lungs out and like wailing into the night. It's a 40-minute walk from my house to his house, or his house to my house, and I was just screaming into the night, and it was just so sad. It was just one of the saddest moments of my life. And then I decided to borrow someone else's phone, someone in my family, and I hid in a staircase and I called the cops. And it was like a realization. If I was going to cry and yell at night, and someone that I thought loved me and I loved them back was making me feel that way, that made me realize, this probably isn't it. So that, in a nutshell, was kind of the relationship I went through.
So tell me, I feel like you're leaving us on a cliffhanger. Tell me what happened. So you called the police. Like, did anything come of that situation? Were you able to press any charges against him?
So when I called the police, and it was really reassuring to know that authorities also sympathize over the phone, and aren't just like cold cut, like, okay, tell me his information, do this, do that. The person I was talking to was like, it's going to be okay. Someone who loves you isn't supposed to do this. We're going to apprehend him now. This isn't going to happen to you again. Give me his address, his name. And then I have a team going in there right now to get him. And when it was all blurry. It was all blurry. Again, I was hiding inside like a stairwell
Mm-hmm.
and I was making that phone call. And that night I just cried enough tears that I didn't have any left in me. It was almost like a numb feeling, like an empty feeling where you've just let everything out. And after calling the cops, I just felt like a shell sitting in that stairwell. So the cops apprehended him. I was on the phone with one of the agents and they were walking me through what was happening. It's like they're entering his room right now. They're getting him. They're leaving, and he's going to be held. And this isn't going to happen to you anymore. And they also sent a team over to my house. And on top of everything happening, I have this relationship with my family where I don't really talk to them about emotional stuff. I can't really tell them about my feelings and much less all of this stuff happening. So I was trying my best to keep things under wraps. On top of being so stressed out and having so much anxiety, I was trying to like sneak around and make sure that they couldn't figure out what was going on. And luckily I'm in this condo building, so there's more than just myself in the building. So the cops pulled up in the driveway and I had hoped that my parents were still fast asleep. I haven't entered the house quite yet. And I left to go to the driveway and the cops came. And when they came, they just saw me in just a full mess because like I mentioned, when I try to leave his place, he tries to like grab me and hold me down. And when I saw them, they were asking me questions and they were kind of just like evaluating me. They're like, what happened? Tell me what really went down. And what happened that night when I tried to leave was he was holding me in a chokehold. And basically I was like hitting him to try to get him off of me. And while he was choking me, he says, I'm only going to let go if you calm down. And I'm like, there's no way you can calm down from something like that. So it activated my fight or flight even more. And I just couldn't calm down. And he like grasped even tighter and tighter. And that's when I started to feel like the oxygen was leaving me. I truly thought I was going to die at that moment. And I started like fading a little bit. And once he realized that like I wasn't resisting as much and I was kind of like slipping from his arms, that's when he let go. And that moment of shock where he realized like he almost might have really ended my life, kind of let him sit there and what was going on. And I was able to get out of there. And so I explained that to the cops and it was like, I didn't really need to show much. They were just like, they just looked at my neck and they were like, yeah, that's all the proof we need. And they asked me if I wanted to appear in court or make any statements and stuff like that. I, at the time, just really wanted nothing to do with it. Looking back now, I don't know if I would have changed my decision. It was something that maybe would have helped if I showed up. But what they did instead was take a recording of me, like a recorded statement, so that they could use that in court. And I never showed up for any of the hearings and stuff like that. But that was the last time I ever saw him. And that's how that night went.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, you are so strong. And I'm
Yeah.
so proud of you for breaking out of that because those things can go on and on and on. And it's such a tragedy. Okay, a couple questions. I know you mentioned earlier, some of his childhood and perhaps him feeling a lack of control. Can you tell, the audience, there's a lot of people and we have all kinds of listeners. We have listeners that have come from maybe a traumatic childhood and also maybe what, quote unquote, normal could be. So what was your childhood experience like? Don't go into all the details, but in a nutshell, what kind of, do you feel like maybe any of that had to do with why you were able to find yourself in that situation? You tell us.
I absolutely agree that childhood has a lot and maybe everything to do with why we fall into the relationships that we fall into, because that was the example of what we were given and shown. And that's where our comfort zone is. And so we gravitate and are attracted to a lot of the things that repeat what we felt in childhood, because that's the only kind of love we've known. So on that note, my my parents come from a background of sort of the similar situation where their parents always told them what to do. They never had choices. And in that sense, like I, without like, my parents are great.
Yeah.
They've raised me to a wonderful woman, and I thank them so much for everything. But they did put a lot of expectations on me. They did control a lot of aspects of my life. And growing up, they wanted to excel in everything. So I was entered into so many competitions. Anything you can name of, I probably participated in. And they always wanted me to do well. So they were very strict on telling me what to do, how to do this, how to do that. So I was so used to being in this environment where I was controlled because that's how I thought love looked like. That was my version of being loved and how they should love. So I did fall into that same pattern in that abusive relationship where he was making the decisions. He was telling me what to do. He wanted to control every aspect of my life when we were together. And that's why I think I fell into a relationship with him. And also, even shortly after that, before I started therapy and really diving into my trauma and healing, that I fell into relationships where they're always telling me what to do, always telling me what to wear, who to see, what friends to make, what friends not to make, where places to go. And yeah, I feel like childhood does play a lot into why I did the things I did. And I think it played a lot to how people fall into their own relationships too.
Okay, so Veronica, I want to ask a little bit more about the courting of the relationship, because a lot of what we hear about, whether dealing with narcissistic people, abusive people, is there's that grooming phase. And I know that you touched on having that click and that chemistry. And then also, I guess, tying into that, talking about the fact that you guys were together a whole year before a lot of this started transpiring. And I think it shows so much insight and intellect that you've made that connection with possibly, having you move away and all these new opportunities, how that changed the dynamic. But can you tell us more about, just now that you've looked back on it, things you think he was doing to really grab hold of you? Because right now we can have listeners that are in a position where they're wondering, is my relationship okay? Am I in a relationship with someone that is unhealthy, that is toxic? And I think much like, sometimes we do this podcast for like addiction or whatever else, they can be noticing these red flags and learn from survivors like us that have been through these different events.
Yeah, that's a good question. So based on my experience and with this relationship, actually, it was my very first one. So I think that's also something really important because a lot of that plays into why I stayed and how I was feeling. It was very new. I had no premise of what a good relationship looked like. It was my first time having a boyfriend. And I think that kind of worked against me in that sense because I had no examples of what love, like good love, was supposed to be like. And so I think my heart goes out to people whose first relationship is something like that too, because I think that's almost one of the hardest ones to get out of because you don't know what it's like to be in a good relationship. That's your example of a relationship. And so on that note, I never really had like betrayal in that sense of a relationship. So I never knew what signs to really expect or what to look out for. But I think going back to when I went on my internship, I knew what I was forming more connections and different connections because I'm in here in Canada and I went over to the States. I started to see like what relationships look like outside and just like away from my bubble. So I started to see behaviors that were more healthy and then started to like click that a few things that he was doing wasn't quite healthy. So going more back to what things to spot and what to look out for, what kind of personality hints that kind of lead to seeing the signs. I would say if so a lot of people make mistakes, but when you feel a little bit betrayed or disrespected, um, if that person doesn't acknowledge you when you bring it up, because in that relationship, it was a lot of like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand what you're seeing. Like that's not what it means. When they don't acknowledge it, when they deflect it and they don't accept the blame, that would be one of the signs. Um, and it comes also like, that's also a bit of a mixture of being young and kind of like not really wanting to own up to things. But if they constantly do that, and every time you bring something up that hurts you, and they're trying to spin the story, manipulate it to have them not be the victim and have them not feel like they were doing anything wrong, that's something to really look out for. So if and also on top of that, if they do say I'm sorry and it doesn't feel that genuine, actually I'll take that back, because sometimes, and in my relationship as well, um, manipulators can be really good
But
at playing
apologizing, yeah.
along with your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll be like, I'm so sorry. I'm the worst person in the world. You don't deserve me. You don't
Yeah.
like, I'm the worst person ever. If they go super dramatic and they almost want your sympathy,
Yeah.
if they're almost like squeezing your sympathy out of you, that's also another sign.
Mm-hmm.
Because if someone is really apologetic and really cared about how you felt about it, they wouldn't shift it on them. They wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
shift the fact that they are the victim in this. Like, you're the one who got hurt.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like it's always all about them. I mean, that's what it comes
yeah.
down to. But yeah, I agree. They do twist things.
Yeah, exactly. So, looking for signs like that. And also, when you bring something up to them that really hurt you and they still do the exact same thing, and then it becomes just like a, oh, you're crazy, you're
Yeah.
all of these all of these statements of like, you're just insecure, you're too scared of this, or you don't trust anybody, or blah blah blah, then that's another sign of them deflecting and pointing it on you and not on them. It's all about them being right, it's all about them um not causing the problem. Those are signs to look out for.
Yeah. I feel like you really hit the nail on the head because with the whole first boyfriend thing, because my first boyfriend in high school, I was with him for years and we had good times for sure, but he had a dark side and he could be verbally and physically abusive, predominantly verbally abusive, just a couple times physical, but here I am saying
Mhm.
just a couple. At the end of the day, I don't think I would have later in life. I've learned so much, fell or stayed in that. But I think it
Yeah.
is, we are so vulnerable in the beginning. And, we do have a lot of young listeners. And, I think one of the reasons I do the podcast is because I don't want people to blame themselves. And like you said, when you were in that stairwell, just feeling like a shell of a person, it's almost like you feel like this moment of almost like not loving yourself anymore because you're
Mhm.
so lost. And I think, I know I want to ask like when was your lowest point, but I feel like that's what you're saying was your lowest point. So I guess
Yeah,
my next
yeah.
question would be like what's the next day look like? So how to tell the listeners, like, how did you start to inch by inch dig out of this hole and this shell as things progressed and you got away?
Mhm. So quite literally the next day, just because the route that I took where the authorities were involved, it was
Mm-hmm.
almost more like a solidified decision. Like,
Mm,
they are making sure I don't talk to him
yeah.
anymore. And that's something that I felt like I was very fortunate to have, because a lot of the times, and this was also the case with me,
Mm-hmm.
like when you decide to walk away and you're like, okay, this is it. But like expert manipulators,
Mm-hmm.
expert narcissists, like find a way to still latch on to you,
Mm-hmm.
find a way to still like bring you back because they want the control. They want it to be about them. I had the fortunate case of like having the authorities be involved legally. He couldn't contact me and all that kind of stuff. So it really gave me the opportunity to be like, okay, I can start fresh. Like, I can rebuild. But it took a while to rebuild. It's not an easy journey, because straight after you get out of that, there's that relief of like, okay, it's over. It's finally over. But then you have this part of yourself, and and it's very understandable because you were in a relationship with that person and you did love them in the way you gave love. You were like, I'm alone. I don't have that person anymore. I can't talk to them. And before you saw them as this abuser, they were your partner. They were someone you had a connection with. And so I was also grieving that part.
Sure.
And after that as well, like slowly after that, I just felt like, so in my case, I had the same friend group with him. So I made the decision for myself. And what happened with me was that I just cut everybody off.
Yeah.
I never talked to any of his friends or my friends also. And I just didn't want to have anything to do with that. I think once that line was set, I was like, I can't go back. I can't find a way to go back. So I felt very alone. And on top of that, again, I couldn't talk to my family because that was something I felt like they couldn't really understand. So I was going through the motions by myself. So it was even harder to really find the healing and the growing. After the cops and all that technical stuff went through, they referred me to a counselor. And I was trying to keep everything secret still. So I told them not to leave a paper trail. I told them to correspond to me everything electronically. But they even messed up with that. So I felt a little bit betrayed. And I was like, I don't want to see anybody, like not even a counselor. I was just like, I don't want to have anything to do with this ever again. Like, this is the worst part of my life. I don't want anything to do with it. So I was going through life trying to figure out how to bounce back. And my version of bouncing back was trying to be the it girl.
Yeah.
It was so weird. It was so weird because back in the internship, like I lost this weight. I was getting into makeup. I was trying to like be a woman.
Yeah.
And that was my moment. Like after he left, I was like, I'm about to be that bitch. I was like, I like dressed up, went out. I was like talking to all these guys. I was trying to fill that void because on top of that, he was like cheating on me.
Yeah. So you have all those insecurities. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, if I can't be the girl that he wants, I'm going to be the girl that everybody wants. So I was getting all this gratification from superficial things, all these likes, dressing up in a way where I was so feminine, so sexy, all that kind of stuff. And going out to parties and drinking and having all these guys hit on me. I went down a slope of like being, a little bit trashy in that sense. So that I felt at the time, I was like, oh yeah, I'm feeling so much better. I have all this confidence. So many of these people are hitting on me, blah, blah, blah. But it never was any fulfilling relationships. Like I would have a few friends, but they would be friends that would just influence me to party and drink and all that kind of stuff. And then I would meet these guys, but it was the same kind of pattern. They weren't the kinds that were going to commit to you. So it would be like, I'm talking to someone, but he was talking to someone else behind my back, or like, we're just friends, but I want to see you whenever I want to see you and all that kind of stuff. So it was 2 years of doing that. And it wasn't until I met my current boyfriend, actually, that he kind of explained therapy to me. He kind of was like, I go through these things and I've dealt with my trauma with this and I did this. And it sounds like you've went through a lot. Maybe you could try to go back to like seeing a therapist or talking about counseling. Like he genuinely just cared about me. And he was a guy that I met that was kind of different from all the other guys. And that kind of helped me sort of like realize what I really wanted in a person and also what I wanted to be as a person. So I started to go into counseling, and then I started to realize how my childhood affects how I got into relationships. That was the big one. That was like, oh, that's how I got into that relationship. And then from there, I also just realized like I'm a very talented person. I am also a very smart person. I'm like, I can't just dwindle my life down to partying and hooking up with guys. I want to do something more with my life. And so I started getting to more self-help things. I started getting more into learning what more about my industry. I was in hospitality and getting a really good job, because, and I didn't mention this, like back in my relationship, the abusive relationship, I got fired because I kept calling in sick, because I got into so many fights with him that I couldn't show up with all these bruises and all that kind of stuff. So I started to find more confidence in myself when I got a really good job, and I just started to build myself up from there and realize I deserve so much more. But I guess, long story short, what I'm trying to say is, like, it was a long journey for me, and it was a long journey alone, because I didn't meet anybody for a while that understood what I was going through and understood what I needed to hear, what I needed to get out of my chest, until much later. And I guess, in a way, like this podcast and also what I'm trying to do with social media is to try to reach as many people as possible before they go down a longer road of, sort of like empty healing, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and it's super admirable, which, I think you had such incredible strength to really cut people off. I think that at the end of the day, I had to do that with my addiction. And so listening to you tell the story and kind of go through all that you've done to come out on the other side has really been amazing. And I guess what I want the listeners to take away from this is that, sometimes we have to make those sacrifices and those decisions to change our lives. And Veronica, I feel like in your case, you were on the right path. You made those decisions to cut people off, to preserve yourself and your own health and well-being and your future. And then, you took a turn. You went out and you had to kind of find yourself. And I was just watching this recent like meme or post or something, and it was saying, like, how about showing a little self-love and embracing who we used to be, because it's gotten us to who we are now. And I felt like so much hero vibes, not to be cheesy, from like hearing you just speak about how you drew that line and you made the decision. And what I love that the listeners are hearing is you saying that, reaching out to the authorities is okay. And if anything, it can put you in a better situation and help you to make that decision and stick to that decision. And I so heard you with that. But in saying that, I know that you've made a lot of changes to your life, and now, you're on Instagram, you're trying to create a space for domestic survivors of abuse. And I want to know a little bit about, like, tell the listener who you are today, how they can find you, follow you, kind of what defines who Veronica is today.
Yeah. So what I am building and trying to make in the future is sort of like a coaching slash life coaching kind of experience. So I felt like people like myself were alone because we didn't have anyone who truly understood. And I feel like the only people that can really understand are the people who have gone through something similar. And I felt like, in that sense, I wanted to take on that role of being someone that people who are going through this or who have gone through this can lean on, and I can help them through their own trauma and through their own experience and rebuild their life back into something that they can take back control of, that they can feel proud of and feel really happy about, and also help build up their esteem back and their identity back. Because a lot of the times, and I think most of the times, we lose ourselves. We lost a part of ourselves and we don't know where to go, what to do. And so I want to at least help guide and rebuild whoever is going through that. And so I've decided to take on that, and on my Instagram, which is at Vero Davila, VeroDevilla. My Instagram is there. Feel free for anyone to reach out to me. I love hearing people's stories and their journeys and their struggles, and being able to be that person that they can that they can talk to, that they can ask for advice on, and help them through whatever they're going through when it comes to domestic trauma of abuse and trying to go through the motions. So it's still in the beginning stages, so I'm still building it up. But I've gotten a lot of support from my friends, and I've gotten a lot of support from the friends that I cut off, really. It was also an outlet for them to reach out to me, and they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what was happening. So it was almost like closure for me. So I want to be able to have people feel, give people the opportunity to build themselves back up from something like that, the way I have, or even in their own version, to be a better part of them, to be a better version of themselves.
Well, they say it takes a village, and I have this magnet that I have sitting on my windowsill, and it says, life isn't about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself. And I think, who doesn't need a guide or someone to help me along the journey of discovering, finding, and creating a true, happy, healthy life free of toxic relationships? And, you would be a great person to utilize for that. And I know that right now on this episode, you've shared so much strength, hope, and light, and I appreciate you, Veronica, so much. Thank you to all my listeners for tuning in to another episode of Abuse Recovery Success. It was so amazing having Veronica as a guest. And for all of my listeners, hang in there. Whatever situation you're in, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And remember, we have strength in our community at Abuse Recovery Success. You can find us on abuserecoverysuccess.com. You can find me at April_Hills on TikTok and Instagram. Thank you guys for another great episode. Thanks, Veronica.
Thank you so much.